Have issues with Amazon trying to suppress me this year. For whatever reason, so it was like we're sticking her on anyway. Hello. And we're I'm gonna stick this. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Can I stick this in the middle there? I'm gonna be able to. I'll kind of stand behind. I'll stand behind. That's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lord.
I love your Fire Nation cosplay.
Thank you.
Please don't attack.
I know, don't attack.
Oh,
and then I never got one. They're bringing water.
You know, they haven't been putting waters in the rooms this year.
Only one that had it was Porter Truck, but everyone else, it was like outside and you had to have a volunteer bring it. That's my favorite episode.
Yeah, which sucks.
What do you think? I think it's cute.
But they started bringing waters. Maybe she's coming back.
Yeah, all right. 100%. Yeah, we'll have to. Oh, and that was the last panel. That'd be great. And then that's just
should have got like a Diet Coke. I'm like, more panels today. 3.
Yeah, I'll get it. I can.
Looks like it's going to be another full room.
Yeah, I'll buy socials. I'm going to put your number.
No, I'm not. I got to go over to the follow-up photo shoot. That's why I dressed for the panel. And then I've got to do a writer's track one at 7. And then I'm done. So I have nothing to do.
You're going to come have fun with us?
Yes, and I'm going to have fun with you. Oh, and I'm going to the foundation panel. If you haven't seen foundation, it's amazing.
Okay, well, we should definitely.
I'll do it.
All right.
Oh my gosh. As soon as I found
Can we
out.
get water?
I actually have. Yeah, I know. I have a lot of healing, so if anything, I have
So
many. Margaret will have to retreat.
Thank you. I'll meet you at the Hilton. You don't have to come here.
Raise your hand if you did not get a raffle ticket.
I
Raise
weigh
both hands if you have a seat. Right? If you need a raffle ticket and you have a seat, go like this. No, okay. And then you just have a seat, just go like this. I don't know what the strategy is here.
Will you tag us in the picture that you took? I don't know whose camera it was. Margaret? Margaret? Will you tag us all in your picture? So we then we don't have to get everyone to take it.
Yeah,
We can just steal hers.
Exactly.
okay.
Better at that.
Well, I will. Did you put your phone number away?
I don't know why would I. I'm Hanako, by the way.
Mary, so nice to meet you. I love
I
your
think we were on a panel last year.
I feel like we were, yeah.
A lot of stimulation, right? Yeah. A lot of just.
You having a good dragon so far?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm at least gonna.
Today is my relaxed day. This is the only panel I'm
Then you can have my number, and I may have to send the picture.
That was me yesterday. But today I had all the panels.
Yesterday was my busy day. Yeah, I did 5 yesterday.
Okay, sounds good. My reception sucks right now.
Mine does.
Yeah, I think we're all having that problem. I did yesterday.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Oh, it
What's
is.
the theme this year? Because I know it's not you anymore.
It's I'm glad there's a lot of people. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Imagine all get us kind of I think we will.
Is there jello shots?
Oh wow. Yeah, okay.
You know, I'm pretty sure you can find some.
Yeah,
No, they make their own, the track
I know.
people.
Oh my
And then
God.
they have them behind
These
us,
are some
like
great questions.
by the DJ area.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for them that way.
These are awesome questions. So really fun. Oh, and I get to be in a panel with Mary and Hanako again.
Yay!
These are some great questions. Great questions. These are really good questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah, I probably should look at them.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And then one of them Joseph Sada. And it was We Were Liars.
Hey, friends, if you have an open seat next to you, can you raise your hand, please?
We've been trying.
Awesome. So we've got a couple people here. You might have to split up. I'm so sorry. We're going to see here and see here. You've got open.
I'm not actually I just volunteer, so I just
There's one there and then if you're looking for a seat, we've got one at the front. We've got one on this side right here.
You're like, why doesn't anyone want to sit next to you?
I picked.
Oh, you're
Yesterday I was like,
yeah, no one's no one's
It's you, Sarah. You. All you.
oh my gosh, what the fuck's the hell?
No, it's Robin Hood. Oh, Robin Hood. It's Robin Hood. This is my childhood first love. And still my absolute favorite thing in the world.
So did you read the book?
Oh, good. For Indian Hunger Games.
The one they ordered from Canada
Yeah.
because they don't have it in the United States yet. Her Twisted Tale with Maid Marian literally is not published in the United States. And last year I showed it at Dragon Con. I'm like, will you sign it?
I'm like, where'd you get this?
How did you get this?
Like, I ordered it from Canada.
She will find a way.
Yep.
I think we're going to start with housekeeping,
My
so we have time
boyfriend
for
who was
questions.
from Canada.
More questions.
George
You going to the prom with him?
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Sunrise on the Reaping. If you're not trying to be a Sunrise on the Reaping, you are in the wrong room. A few housekeeping things before we get started. Just so you know, we are a family-friendly track, so we're going to keep it PG. That includes all of your questions and my panelists. When we do questions at the end, if you could just keep it short and direct. What else?
Spoilers.
Oh, yes. This is a spoiler panel. We are going to be talking about all things Sunrise on the Reaping. So if you don't want to be spoiled for that, maybe speak now or forever hold your peace.
And then we will
Got a last couple minute people coming in. Yes. By show of hands, how many of you all have like actively read and finished Sunrise on the Reaping?
Everyone.
Okay,
Hopefully
I should
everyone.
Everyone that didn't raise their hand is my emotional support human.
Okay. Be ready. Well, there's not many, so I think we're gonna have to share. So
Share emotional support humans.
yes.
I've got my emotional support dragon, so I'm okay.
Oh, okay. Great.
All right. Thank you all for being so patient. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Athena. I love The Hunger Games. I started reading it in middle school. And I remember checking out the first one from the library and going, oh, I'll just check it out and see if I like it. And then I blew through it. And then none of the other books were available at the library anymore for months. So that's where my Hunger Games obsession started. And it has continued to this day. So for all of my panelists, if you could just introduce yourself and your experience with reading The Hunger Games and this year's Sunrise on the Reaping.
I knew they put me here for a reason. Hi, I'm Mary Mancusi. I write Disney books and dragon books. This is my book, Sally's Limit. It's A Nightmare Before Christmas, Twisted Tale, and I have a new book coming out on Tuesday called Dawn of the Dragons. If you like Dragon Apocalypse, come up here afterwards, and I got stuff. I read The Hunger Games when it first came out. I was not in middle school. Whew, not even a child. But anyway, I hadn't read it since it originally came out. And last year, Natalie, our lovely track director, was like, can you be on a Hunger Games panel? I'm like, no, I haven't read it in a long time. And then she's like, yeah, but I really want you on this panel. And so I was like, okay. So I reread the whole series, and then I was like, I fell in love with it. I was like, this stands up so well. So many of those, early aughts books do not stand up very well. But these could have been written, yesterday, and they're still so relevant. And it just made me fall in love with the series all over again. So of course, when Sunrise and the Reaping came out, I had to be one of the first to buy it.
Hi, my name is Hanako M. I am the creator and host of the Phantom Hybrid podcast. We are a pop culture podcast. We do a lot of TV and film review, and we also talk about the Atlanta con scene. I think I got into Hunger Games a little bit late. I also was not in my teens when this book came out, but I had the advantage of being able to read all three books at the same time and fell in love with them. I read Songbirds last year, right before we did the panel here, and fell in love again. And then when I found out they were doing a Haymitch book again, like Mary, I had to be one of the first to get it because I'm so interested in that story, and it did not disappoint.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marianne. I'm actually on staff here at the Wildwood Track, and I am here by virtue of I begged hard enough. I first read The Hunger Games, I think, also in like middle high school, something like that. I hadn't read it in years. In fact, last year I sat in the back of the room for the Ballads of Songbirds and Snake panel, and I remember reading a different book and listening half of one year and being like, huh, is this about President Snow? Because I hadn't read it yet. You know how it is, you get busy with other stuff. But then, deep cut here, has anybody heard of Emily Ann on TikTok, The Hunger Games? Yeah, okay. I follow them, I love them. And I saw them posting about Summer's and Reaping. I'm like, oh, there's a new book. That's really cool. So when I was traveling for work, I reread the entire series, and then I devoured it in like 4 hours and sobbed on a plane to LA, I think. And that's when I texted Natalie, and I was like, please, 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 I have help. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Lauren Thoman. This is my first Dragon Con. So I have a little bit of a fun piece of trivia about me and the Hunger Games, which is I read it. I was fully an adult. I had 2 children. They were very, very small. And all of the books were out, had been out for a little bit, but I had all 3 of them for a while and I hadn't gotten around to them. But then I was doing a lot of like nighttime readings. And so so when you have a lot of time, you have to sit there. So I blew through the whole series in like 4 days, and I loved it so much. And after I finished reading it, I was like, okay, that was amazing. I feel so many things. What else is out there that's going to make me feel this way? And at the time, we were in the heyday of YA's dystopian. Every book was trying to chase the Hunger Games, and I read like 4 of them, and none of them made me feel the way that the Hunger Games made me feel. And to be fair, that wasn't those books' fault. I have since revisited some of them, and I was like, I was too hard on these books when they came out. The problem was I just wanted to read the Hunger Games again for the first time. That's really the feeling I was chasing. But at the time, I was sleep deprived and not making a lot of sense in my own mind. So I was like, how hard can it be to write a book that's as good as the Hunger Games? And so I was like, I'm just going to write one. And spoilers, the first book I ever tried writing, well, I got like 4 pages into my YA dystopian idea, and I was like, this is hard, and this is also bad. But then I was like, okay, maybe not this, but I do like this writing thing, so I started writing other things. So that's why I became a writer, is because of the Hunger Games.
Wow.
So, and then, of course, but even after that, Songbirds and Snakes came out, and I was like, I don't want to read a villain redemption story. And so I sat on it for a little while until the movie was going to come out. And I love movies. And I was like, but if I'm going to go to the movie, I need to read the book first. So I read the book, and then I was like, this is amazing. I will never doubt Suzanne Collins ever again. I don't know what I was thinking that she was going to like cheapen the series. There's no way. The book got so much deeper into things. So then when Sunrise and the Reaping came out, I was just like, yes, I will have it immediately. And I read it, and I was like, well, this is the most brutal thing I've ever read in my life. I am deeply depressed, but also love her so much. And so, yeah, so thank you, Suzanne Collins, for ruining me just entirely, but also giving me a career.
All right, hello, I'm Margaret Robbins. I am a middle and high school English and history teacher. I'm also a scholar of comics, YA lit, and pop culture. So I first read this book when I first started teaching middle school, during the 2006-2007 school year. And I read it with my students in mind because they kept telling me about it. And I was like, that and Twilight both. So I read them both. And I enjoyed both, but honestly, I liked this one better. And I fell in love with this series. And I read Sunrise on the Reaping this summer because I teach the Hunger Games now every spring. And my students kept telling me I should read it. And honestly, I've been reading a lot of romantasy, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to read it so I can talk to the students about it. And I read it and I loved it. And I have a lot of deep feelings that I'm excited to talk about with this book. So excited to be here and thank you guys for coming.
I am Jana Burkhart. I am on the YA Lit staff volunteer track. And I also am a middle school teacher. And I read these not when I was in middle school, but when I was teaching middle school. And so that was fun. But I love them. My kind of claim to fame is I made my family read them by reading them aloud to them with no choices on a long car trip. And I did get through all three of them. Yes, I did. And I made them listen. But they loved it. And so when the others came out, I mean, immediate pre-order. I think we actually had like 4 copies of Songbirds and Snakes hanging around our house for a while there because we just kept pre-ordering things. But I had to listen to Sunrise on the Reaping because my pre-order didn't get here on time. So I had to take my time a little bit. But it was awesome.
Just as a sidebar, since you made your whole family read it, how did they react to, but what about the baby?
Oh, yeah, no, there were many gasps. I definitely took my dramatic moments. I'm a very dramatic reader. So.
Okay, I just needed to know that for my own
perfect.
sake.
Yeah.
All right, so we've already got a prequel about President Snow, and the original series is pretty self-contained in terms of like storyline and character motivations and things like that. So why Haymitch and why now? Furthering the story, like what are your feelings on like Suzanne Collins picking Haymitch, and why do you think she decided now was the time to do it?
Well, fortunately and unfortunately for us as a society, she seems to always pick a time to write a book when we need a book, and she has something to say. As far as why Haymitch, obviously there's a lot of curiosity about his backstory. He is the only other winner in District 12, besides if you count Lucy and Kenneth, and Peta. But anyway, there's not a lot of winners from 12, let's say. So here's our only guy that we haven't had the prequel for who won 12. And I think that she knew the story could be really, a window into some of the things we're facing today, especially truth in media and what we see versus reality, and how we judge that and how we understand truth anymore. What is true? It's when I read 1984 as like a teenager, I was like, this is so stupid. Like 2 + 2 is obviously 4. You could never convince me it's 5. Now I'm not so sure with everything that's going on that there isn't a way to convince people that 2 + 2 is 5. They clearly believe weirder things than that. And so I think that, she had something to say about this, and this was a perfect example.
Yeah, you took a lot of my answer.
I'm so sorry. That's why I was like, oh, I'm good.
One of the great ways that we do learn is through reading, through literature, and without getting political, our political climate today, I think a lot of what we see in Sunrise on the Reaping kind of echoes that, as far as propaganda, like you said, the way our media is given to us, and what the contrast versus what we actually see versus what actually happened. Reading Haymitch's story, or listening, because I actually did the audiobook for this one, which was brilliant. I've never sat through an entire audiobook before I did with this one. It was so great. But just listening to Haymitch's story and just the ways his Hunger Games was kind of manipulated, it does explain a lot when you get to the main series about why Katniss and Peta didn't really know about their own town's victor. There was a lot of his story that was edited out, a lot of things that were lies, and I think it's very comparable to what we're dealing with right now with the erasing of history, just changing things, ignoring laws, government, that sort of thing. We get all of that in Sunrise on the Reaping. It's very relevant, unfortunately.
To talk about why I think Haymitch's story and why now. Forgive me, but I want to talk briefly about why Snow first, because I think that those two are just really inextricably linked. And I had a similar reaction to his book being like, why would I want to read about Snow? That's like, I hate that guy. He sucks, you know? But I'm so glad that I read that book because I think it's so interesting. And I think, and bear with me for a second, I think she wanted to humanize him. I really think she did, because in the original trilogy, Pan M and Snow and his entire government end up seeming like this untouchable, all-powerful, like incredible entity that just like manipulates the people like puppets, right? And that's not true, but it's also far more insidious. They're a bunch of people who like their wealth and power and do a bunch of really awful things to keep it. And I think we can all relate to that concept a little bit, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that. I think a lot of people are used to seeing, oppositional groups in, media and movies and books and stuff, and thinking, oh wow, what a crazy big evil organization. Thank God we don't have those. But we do. They're here, and I think it's important to understand that they are here. They are people. They're gonna look like us. They're gonna have lives like us. Like this is a thing we face and will face and did face. And so I think that she really wanted to kind of create the foundation of the world, give us context, give us a history, make it clear that, like, if this was built out of a war too, like Snow sees himself as a victorious survivor of a horrible war, and he's building something good and lasting. Like, he thinks he's doing a good thing, And I think that then when she did that, she was like, okay, now there's this huge gap. How did we get from the 10th games where we kept everybody in a cage in a zoo and had like nothing, and there were all these gaps in the arena, to the Hunger Games we know of, the 74th Hunger Games, where there's cameras and trees and rocks and interviews and this whole grand thing. And I think that the natural point to find that was Haymitch. And I think that he, like the rest of the panelists have said so far, he had a story we wanted to hear. Like I know in my original reading of the trilogy, Haymitch was the character I kind of felt the most confused about. And I imagine I may not be alone in that. Like, I loved him, he was a hero, and also he was a jerk, like the way he treated Katniss and the way that he hid things from them. I was very confused about that. So, and I think I think she knew that. And I think that he needed the most kind of telling. And I think that it was important for us to see the middle point of the progress from what Snow started to build in Ballad and what we encountered in the Hunger Games, because that is an ongoing process, and that is what we will see and have seen in our own world.
Yeah, I have thought quite a bit about this because she took a lot of the words out of my mouth, but but no, it's okay, because that means that I'm not going to talk too long. I still have more words, don't worry. But I too think it is kind of impossible to talk about Sunrise on the Reaping without talking about Songbirds and Snakes, because I believe they are two books in conversation with each other in a way that they aren't even with the original trilogy.
Yes.
I think those two, like, I have had numerous people that were like, well, I didn't read Songbird, but I want to read Sunrise because I like Haymitch. And I was like, nope, read Songbirds first. Because I was like, I do not think you can appreciate what she is doing in Sunrise without reading Songbirds. I think these two books are two halves of one conversation. And so with Songbirds, I believe that what she was doing, I think she was humanizing him, but I think she was doing, like Suzanne Collins has famously said, I write books when I have something to say. And I think it's not when there's more story in my head that I want to like put out on a page. I think I have something to say to you, reader. I have something I am trying to communicate to you. And so to figure out why Haymitch, I think the first question is why Snow? And to me, I have felt like she wanted to show Snow didn't start as a villain. Snow started as a guy that was in a position of privilege that didn't see it that way because he did struggle in some ways. Because like his family was poor. They had lost a lot of what they had. He had some struggles. He was looked down on by some of his peers. But at the same time, he had tremendous privilege in Pan Am as a whole. He had systemic privilege, even though individually he had things that he struggled with. And he was so determined to keep that privilege that every time he was faced with a hard choice, he chose whatever he needed to do to safeguard his own privilege in society. And that turned him from a normal, like a normal teenager who considered himself a good person to a villain. And I feel like anyone that's like, well, Snow was a sociopath from the beginning. I'm like, no, he wasn't. That's why she wrote that book, to show us this isn't someone that was uniquely evil. This was a normal person who bought so hard into the propaganda and who cared about his safeguarding his own privilege so much, he was willing to sacrifice literally everything, including his own morals, to protect those things. And then she released Songbirds, and then a lot of the fans were like, oh, Snow, I love him, he's my baby. And there was the woobification of Snow. And then I think, Mama Suzanne went, nope, okay. All right, we're gonna have a talk, you and me, reader. Because if you're looking at Snow's decisions and going, I can understand why he did that. Whomst among us would not have done those things. It's really understandable. And she's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna take another white boy, the same age, who has some privilege, but also some struggle. And I'm going to give him a lot of the exact same choices. And I'm going to show you what he could have done if it was more important to him to do the right thing than to protect himself. And so I think the answer to why Haymitch is because she was like, not everyone got what I was doing with Snow, so we're doing it again. Yeah. And we're going to do it in a way that, like, Rogue One is my favorite of the new Star Wars movies. And it also makes me really enjoy the original trilogy more when I watch it now, because I know all of the stuff that went, how hard earned what those characters went through was, like all of the sacrifice that they went through to get there that we didn't think about the first time. And I think now that is what Sunrise is, and Songbirds, to the Hunger Games. I think it is their Rogue One. It shows the struggle and the sacrifice and just how big all of this was, and takes it beyond that small group of characters to a whole galaxy. And it's like, this is not just their struggle, this was everyone's struggle, and so many more people had to put so much on the line to get to your happy ending.
That's actually incredible. That is the coolest thing I've ever heard in
All right. Well, I think in addition to what has already been said, part of why Haymitch is because a lot of my students are very drawn to him, and I think a lot of people are drawn to him because in a lot of ways, and I think as my fellow panelists have said, the two books are in conversation with each other, because Battle of Songbirds and Snakes is about an anti-hero who transitions into a villain, and it raises that question of where is the line. Whereas I think Haymitch's story is more like, is he an anti-hero or is he a hero? And I thought it was interesting that the games, the way they were showcased, seemed to represent him as an anti-hero, or at least they were trying to pitch it that way. Like, he did some bad things, but it was for a good reason. That's what they were trying to show, because they were in denial about how much of his rebellion was going to have an effect on people. But in reality, they saw him as a villain based on the destruction that happened at the end of the book. Whereas us as the reader, I believe that we see him as the hero. And I think a lot of people, especially a lot of adolescents, can really relate to that. It's like, I may be doing these things, I might be doing things that are against the rules or that people don't agree with, but I have good intentions and I'm misunderstood. So I think because of that, the Haymitch narrative is one that resonates with a lot of people. And also, I love the end of the book, the last chapter, because I didn't realize that he knew Katniss's dad and family, but I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, it was intense, but that was a very emotional part of the book for me, among other things. And it just showed a lot of the connections between Catching Fire and Sunrise on the Reaping. It also helped us understand better why Haymitch behaved the way he did when he first met Katniss and Peeta, but also how they gave him hope. And I think part of Haymitch's narrative is that of despair to hope. And to be honest, I think that's a narrative that we need right now and that we need to embrace.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said, and I will be very quick. But I think I really like the parallel between Catching Fire and Sunrise, because I think we thought we knew what happened in Haymitch's games, right? I mean, they watch it in Catching Fire. And I think Suzanne Collins is really telling us, question. You need to question what you think you know. And I think you could say that throughout that entire book. We thought we knew how 12 worked. We thought we knew Haymitch's story. We thought we knew why Haymitch did things that he did in the original trilogy. And I think this kind of turned it all on its head a little bit, that we don't know, right? And so at the end of the day, like, even what he thought he was doing in the games, that didn't show up. His posters didn't get shown, right? And so we have to question what we think we know.
Beautifully said. I'm going to start from the other end of the table this time.
Oh,
So,
dear.
Yes. So prepare yourselves. We got so much lore expansion in Sunrise on the Reaping. We got to hear about like life in District 12, Lenore Dove and the Covey, just the games themselves and how they're built. So if you guys could talk a little bit about like some of the similarities and differences between the other original trilogy, Ballad and Sunrise on the Reaping in that regard and like lore expansion, I would love to hear it.
Being put on the spot now. No, I mean, I love all the lore expansion. I think we all do. We all like to know more and more about, these different characters and the relationships that they had. I mean, Haymitch being, close to Katniss's like mom and dad. I mean, like, come on, that's awesome. We love that. And I think we all get fascinated by the Covey, right? To know and understand more about, well, what happened to them? Where did they go in Katniss's time? Why does she not seem to know them, but know some songs that they probably wrote, right? So I think we still have so many questions about that. And I think she's not answering them on purpose. So it makes you kind of wonder, where are we going to go next? But I do love all of that setup, and I'm very interested to hear what everybody else thinks too.
So I was fascinated that Snow ended up dating a Covey girl. To be honest, at first I didn't buy it. I'm like, this just doesn't seem like Snow's character to me. The more I read in the book, the more I understood the connection. But at first I was like, I don't know. And I felt like, honestly, some things about Snow's girlfriend Katniss reminded him of her. And that's part of why he hated Katniss. So that backstory to me was really fascinating. But oh my gosh, Lenore Dove. I'm trying to keep this part brief because I could talk on and on about it. But honestly, as soon as I read her name, I teach the Raven every year, and I'm like, oh, she's done for. Yeah, I'm like, she is so done for. And I love the part at the end, like her tragic end going along the juxtaposition of the events in the poem.
No.
That wrecked. I'm with you, Marianne. That wrecked me.
What was it, jelly beans or?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
No, it was gumdrops.
Yeah,
Gumdrops.
Right. Yeah.
Just awful.
But like the poem bits.
Yeah, so that wrecked me. But I just like the comparison and the contrast between their relationships, because with Haymitch, I'm like, oh yeah, him dating a Covey girl, that actually makes a lot of sense. And the end part about him always remembering Lenore Dove and the impact she had on him, I think that was beautiful. And again, he literally felt haunted. And I think that's an important aspect of understanding his character. And I'll end there. I could talk more, but I'm going to pass it along.
I was pulling up, there's a bunch of like songwriters who've done versions of the Lenore Dove song, like what was her song, and there's one that I love that's my favorite one. So I was like, but I'm just gonna say it's by an artist named Julia Reeve, and her cover is, composition is so good. Look it up. So I mean, I loved the thing about the lore expansion that I loved the most was when you go into the Hunger Games, and you meet a bunch of characters as adults, and your Katniss's point of view, she kind of views them the way that I think most teenagers tend to view adults, is that they sprang onto this earth fully formed as adults. They have no backstory. Teachers live at school. Like when my kids saw a T-shirt in the grocery store for the first time, I think it broke them. And they just stood there, and they were like, "That is a teacher." And I was like, "Do you want to say hi?" And they were like, "Why is she not in school?" So, and I think there is an element of that with the reader in the original series, where we meet these former victors and we meet, these capital people. But we don't really think, even though we know, like, oh, they won their games, like, good for them. Like, it doesn't resonate in the same way. And so the lore expansion that hit me the hardest was when you brought in characters like Max and Edie and Wirus. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Edie, though. Like, I'm like, this man survived the Hunger Games, had a child, and then they put his child in the Hunger Games to torture him. And then they put him back in the Hunger Games. And he was still, and I think Beatty is a wonder, and also casting Jeffrey Wright in the movie made him so endearing because that man knows how to tug at your heartstrings. And I'm like, this man has suffered so much, and he is still choosing kindness and compassion when he has no reason to, in a world that has been so unbelievably cruel to him in a way it hasn't to almost any other character. Like, I think he has one of the hardest storylines in the entire series. And so, and I felt like she was doing that, not just, it wasn't like fun Easter eggs, like, haha, you remember this person? It was to show us there is history here. And also, you bring in Plutarch, who is at the beginning of this kind of covert line he's walking. He's like resisting, but in a way that keeps his power, because he knows you are going to need allies in high places in order to pull this off. But we know it doesn't get pulled off for another 25 years. And I feel like, as again, I say, I'm like everything, I think Suzanne talking to us. Like, if I ever meet Suzanne Collins, I'd probably just cry and faint. Because she just keeps saying things. I'm like, she has something she needs to say, and it was something that I felt like a lot of us need to hear, which is resistance takes a long time. I think, in modern society, there have been a lot of people in the last, few months, last years, who have dipped their toe into activism for the first time ever. And they're like, I did a protest. Where is the change?
Right.
It did not work. I boycotted for one day. Why is the store still there? And I think that when you look at the history of resistance of oppressive regimes in the US and around the world, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of people working together persistently over time, even though they see very little progress for a very long time. And I think one of the big parallels between Sunrise and Catching Fire is Haymitch tried to do what Katniss does. He tried it on his own with no backup. And it did not work because he was just one kid trying his best. And he kept being like, maybe if I resist this way, it'll change something. Maybe if I resist this way, it'll change something. And it didn't work, even though he had a few allies. He had some people, he had a semblance of a plan, but there was not enough of a movement yet. He was too early in the resistance to have it be effective enough to topple an oppressive regime. And so, which is why when you get to Catching Fire, and Katniss actually I think this was Suzanne being like, it wasn't Katniss, it was the movement behind her. The reason that Katniss was able to succeed as the Mockingjay was because she was a symbol of a movement that had existed before she was born. And Haymitch was part of the origination of that movement. And also even getting into, Lenore Dove and Lucy Gray. Lucy Gray says in Ballad that the Covey were nomadic. They traveled and they were forced to settle in District 12. I'm like, Suzanne, she doesn't do stuff by accident. She was like, no, they were a nomadic people that was told, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Here is your land. You live here now. What does that sound like? And they were never really, and then they were pushed, assimilate. This is not how you don't do life in your culture. You do life in our culture. And assimilate. And then by the time we get to Hunger Games, they're gone. Their culture has been completely eradicated. We never hear of them. Even though we still have some of their cultural impact in the form of their songs, they live on. But Katniss never thinks, oh, this is a Covey song. She's just like, this is a song everyone knows. I don't know where it came from. It's like, it's like does anyone in here know who wrote Happy Birthday? No, because no one knows that. Like, it's just a song that exists in our culture. And that's what it is by the time we get to the Hunger Games. So in ballad, they're a robust people that remember their origins and they have their cultural traditions. In Songbirds and in Sunrise on the Reaping, they have assimilated much more, but they still have a cultural identity, but they are no longer resisting their place in District 12. They're like, well, this is just we're our little part of 12, and here's what we do, but it's fine. And then by Hunger Games, they don't exist. So I think that a lot of that lore is like, on the one hand, yes, it's amazing to learn more about these characters that we already love. And now we know so much more about them. But on the other hand, I feel like she's saying so much about the way culture evolves and the way that it will eat minority cultures. It will eat the marginalized. It will force to assimilate for survival. And that to resist that consumption by the powerful is very hard and is not always successful the first time. It is not always successful the second time. It is not always successful until you get enough people doing it for a long enough time that eventually, like this, it catches fire.
Well, this time you took a lot of what I was going to say, so
You're
welcome. So a couple of thoughts. I'll start with the fun one because the second one is a lot sadder. As is the book. I need to send Suzanne some therapy bills. Like, sorry. I reread the entire trilogy right before I read Sunrise on the Reaping, and personally, I am a big fan. As an autistic person, I'm a very big fan of autistic Katniss. I read her as very autistic. It's okay if you don't. I just see a lot of that. Yeah, and I'm obsessed with the dichotomy between Katniss being like, these are people who live in District 12. They hate me. And then he was just like, and this is blah, 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 and then blah, 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 and then we do this, and he had a son, and blah, 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 and you're like, oh my god, I have so much more information about District 12 than I ever did with Katniss. And it makes you realize how little she gives you, which I think is hysterical. But to build on Lauren's point, I think that Suzanne was very intentional about what she gave us and why she gave it to us. I do think some of it was bridging, like I said, the gap between Ballad and the Hunger Games series, the original trilogy. But I think a lot of it too was about lending weight to what we know. To your point of like, we don't always know where things come from. I think it can be very easy to have the consequences of something or have the outcome of something and just know that that's there and not think about it. Especially if you don't have the history. I'm sorry because this is going to be one of those things that's going to make some people feel a certain type of way, but I was very, very young when 9/11 happened. And I remember at one point I was talking to my parents when I was really like a lot younger, and I said they were talking about, my grandfather gone on a business trip or whatever, and my mom and her siblings and her mom walked into the gate. And I went, what do you mean you can't do that? And she was like, oh, you used to be able to. And I was like, you could just do that at the airport? You could just like walk to the gate at the airport? What? And she was like, oh yeah, it was pre 9/11. And that like contextualized to me, oh my god, this thing had completely shifted the way that we approach this thing, the way we think about it. But I, as a person who was like 4 when that happened, had never known a world pre 9/11. I had not known that. I didn't have the context for it. And so the difference was really strange to me. And if that hadn't been contextualized for me, I would have never thought I never would have understood how rigid it had become in response to what had happened. You know what I mean? So I think that Suzanne Collins was thinking about that sort of thing and thinking about how hard it can be to understand the gravity of a situation or a shift in your culture, a shift in your society, without having the necessary context of what came before. You mentioned some of the characters you have in the trilogy. I feel very emotional about BT, but I think the one that makes me the saddest is Mags. I'm also like kind of a grandma girl. Like I was really close to both my grandmothers. But seeing how it was, these characters that we knew from the original trilogy who had clearly been through a lot. Like, I mean, in the original trilogy, I believe in Catching Fire, Katniss says that she thinks that Max must have had a stroke or something, but she's not sure. And you're like, okay, well, something is like clearly very old. It's not uncommon for that to have happened. Then to get the additional context of the fact that she was tortured and she continued to be a mentor in the Hunger Games for another 24 years. It's devastating, but I think it's important for us to have that knowledge because, you know, to us as readers and to Katniss as a narrator, these characters, this world she lives in, it's all she's ever known. She doesn't have the context of what it was like before, which it means she doesn't have the context of what was sacrificed, what was lost, what has changed. And I think that as we are facing more and more issues with media literacy and social media and shifting narratives and shifting truths and losing bits of history, I think it's important for us to be thinking about that, to be aware of what came before, even if we weren't there for it, to get those narratives to people who were there, who did experience it, to remember that. And I, you know, to your point as well about like Katniss she didn't succeed because she was some magical special girl. I mean, she's really cool, but like it wasn't like only Katniss could do it. Katniss did it because everybody else had built it up. To add an extra painful layer to your point from earlier, everything Katniss succeeded in was something that somebody else failed in and lost something for. She realizes the night blackberries are poisonous because she's watching for PETA. Haymitch didn't have that. He missed that with Lenore. Yeah, sorry about that one. Katniss had the odds that Wyatt always dreamed of having. She was the one that he would have bet on. Because over and over and over, she had put herself together. She had been put in these situations with people who could help guide her because they had lost things themselves. They had learned those lessons. You know what I mean? And I think that it's important for us to know what went into building her into that.
Katniss had the Mockingjay pin because Maisie Donner gave it to her sister.
Like the threads go so deep because it was, you know, it is a movement. It is something that took 75 years to build into something. And a lot of the people who helped build it into what it became were still a part of it too and gave their lives for it in the end. And I think that's just, it's important for us to know because, you know, Katniss is 16 when the series starts. She's 18 by the end of it. I know when I was 16, I wasn't as observant as I am now. I didn't have as much context as I have now. I didn't have the lived experience. So I think having that as readers is just so important. It makes the whole series.
It contextualizes.
It contextualizes it. It makes it both tragic and more hopeful in a weird way, I think.
Yeah. I want to make sure we get to questions at the end. Don't worry, you guys. I'm going to make time for questions. So I'm going to move on to our next topic, and you two can start on this side this time. So now...
I was like looking up all these things for that topic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
So what's next? The casting decisions have come out, and honestly, the casting director ate on Sunrise on the Reaping. And who else would, you know, we can talk about the movie that is coming out next year. We can talk about who else you want to see a prequel for. Do you think we're done with prequels? Should we have another sequel? Like, what are we doing moving forward, guys?
Well, I didn't really look too much into the casting, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing because they've all been amazing. But Finnick, I would really like to see a Finnick story. I think I don't know if they could do it as a young adult book because, I mean, especially if it's the later post Hunger Games. But I think his story still needs to be told, and then we can really, really need therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I can think about what's coming next. I need to see how bad the movie is going to decimate me before I even think about that. But if I could just briefly touch on the previous question, I just think it's very interesting that, you know, the Hunger Games story takes place in our future. You know, it's like Panem is what used to be North America. And there are some things that I think, there are subtle things that she puts in there that really make you think, like the fact that Reaping Day is on July 4th, which is Haymitch's birthday. It's like you took a day that used to signify independence and you turned it into basically a free-for-all slavery lottery. I mean, that's pretty much what it was. I just think those kinds of little things that she throws in is very kind of, again, when she writes when she has something to say, and it's just one of those things that makes you think, but yeah, as far as what comes next, I think I agree with you. I want to see a finished story. So I don't know if they can go back and de-age Sam Clayton though, but I would really love to see that story and just to yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disagree. I think I'm a truther for the Plutarch stories coming next. Because I think the original trilogy was the original trilogy, and I think this is like a weird kind of truncated trilogy. I think she's telling 3 stories. And I think that we've gotten the kind of anti-hero turned villain, we've gotten the anti-hero turned hero, and now I think we're going to have the anti-hero turned anti-hero. The guy who is like pulling the strings behind the scenes is so fundamental, more fundamental than we had any idea of in the original trilogy to the revolution. But is also, like, in my opinion, I think still the most deeply conflicted, morally great character in the entire series. Like, I Plutarch, heavens be, they'll never make me have an opinion about you.
Okay, I changed my answer. I agree with you.
I would love a Finnick story in terms of I love Finnick, but I also think that his story would be sad, but I don't know if it would have a ton of messaging or connection or like deepening lore in the same way that Plutarch would. So I'm really hoping that we get something with him. As for the casting, I am so excited. I think all of it was incredible. I'm really excited for the movie.
So there are 2 casting decisions for the movie that I am especially excited about. One is Jesse Plemons.
As Plutarch.
I think like it was one of those. I was like, if Cooper Hoffman couldn't do it, which is very reasonable to not want to play a role that was originated by his father, who has since passed. I was in my mind, I was like, then it has to be Jesse Plemons. It is Jesse Plemons, and I'm like, he is one of the best actors of his generation. He every single role he's in, he fully embodies, and I buy it so hard. And I'm like, he is so good at doing a lot with a little, and that is Plutarch. He has very little in terms of screen time or page time, but he does a lot. And so I'm like, I'm so excited about this one. And the other one is Elle Fanning as Effie Tracy. Has anyone seen her? Have you seen The Great?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So watching her in that and watching her be like pretty and fun, but also, oh my gosh, she will kill you. And Effie is interesting because she is a character that, she's a capital girl, she's into fashion, but she's clearly a tender heart. She's always had a soft spot for other people, but to live in the society she lives in, she has to think the games are okay. And so she manages to do the thing that I think a lot of people do, which is she is kind to their face. If they need something, if they need a favor, she is happy to offer help to the people in front of her because she's a good person. But she is very oblivious to the systemic problems that put her in the position she's in and other people. And it takes her, she's a teenager in Sunrise on the Reaping, and in the Hunger Games, she is, she's a thriving professional. And it takes her a quarter of a century to figure out, Effie, you are part of this terrible system. You have to, and so I agree. I think if you're going to do another prequel, it needs to be Plutarch, because Plutarch is also a close parallel in terms of the origin story to Snow. He is a legacy capital kid. He was born into immense privilege to a powerful, wealthy family, except unlike Snow's at the beginning, as far as we know, the Heavensbees have always managed to hold on to their wealth. And so he probably had a very similar upbringing as Coriolanus, minus the war and the, eating vermin. And so, but somewhere along the way, something sparked in him where he's like, this isn't okay. And so he's not willing to let go of his privilege, but he also is aware that what's happening is wrong. And he's like, and he's also a very strategic thinker to the point that he almost like divorces it from humanity, where he's like, well, this is the next logical thing to do. And it's like, that is a necessary loss. And I'm like, that's not something an empathetic person does. He's not empathetic, he's very practical. And so I think taking someone that comes from that very high position of privilege and showing how they go from, probably complacent and oblivious, because that's probably how most capital children are raised, to actually being willing to push back, even in a subtle way, and use his power to try to help the resistance. That to me is a fascinating story. And that's the only other prequel I can think of that would really have something to add to this conversation that Suzanne has been having, my friend Suzanne has been having with us. But I also think there is a sequel that I could see happening, and that is Annie's Child, Finnick's son. I could see his story because I think there is also an element of, okay, you've overthrown the oppressive regime, what next?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to think in history, okay, and then the good guys won and everyone was happy forever. And that is not how it works. History is cyclical.
Yep.
And those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it, which there is a reason they are erasing history from our schools. And so
Sorry, I want to jump in. What did Plutarch have that the other families didn't have?
A library. Yeah.
Books from before the dark days.
Yeah.
Yep. Someone in the Heavensby family decided they were going to keep a library, and that gave him power. So,
These are the theories I like to hear.
so I can see there being a story for little Teddy O'Dare, down the line, or Cresta O'Dare. I don't know what we're doing with the last name, but I feel like there is definitely a story to be told about the children of the future, and how they wind up growing up. And I mean, like, yes, Katniss and Peeta have kids, but they also they have parents that met because they were victors in the Hunger Games. Like, I think the more interesting one is the one being raised by a Hunger Games victor who lost her husband to the Hunger Games a second time.
Yeah.
So briefly, a casting decision that I'm really excited about is Joseph Zada as Haymitch, because I saw him in We Were Liars, and it was a really good TV adaptation of the YA novel, and it wrecked me, and I thought he did a great job of being like a tragic hero character, so I'm excited to see what he does in the movie. And also, the other possibility, besides those that have been raised as a prequel, even if it was a short one, I want to know more about the backstory of Katniss's parents, and how they got together. That could be good, at least as a short story.
I know after Songbird, we all wondered about Tigress a little bit too.
Ooh, yeah.
So I think Plutarch is definitely a very, very strong option, but I think we will see Tigress in that. I also think there's some reasons that maybe it wouldn't be him, and that's just because the prequels have all featured 12 and the Cubby. And I'm not sure how Plutarch would fit into that, but I'm sure she could find a way. So I think that could be very interesting, but that has kind of been consistent throughout, right? We have gotten a Cubby Girl and the name, and, we have gotten that every single time. And going to 12 and seeing how it's different than Katniss's time, and that relates to the original. So I think that will still be in a prequel.
I just had a
I'm
thought.
just interested to see how that would work.
What if Katniss is Cubby and doesn't know it?
Oh, I think she is. I think
Yeah,
her dad
I can see
definitely
it.
is.
Yeah, I can
Her
see
dad.
And so she knows the songs, but she doesn't know they're
I'm
her
firmly
songs.
convinced that he's one of them.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Before I move on to audience questions, I just want to say Kieran Culkin as Caesar Cleverman
so
is
good.
iconic.
Oh my God. In all
Okay.
casting.
Please raise your hands. If I see you, I'm going to give you a thumbs up, and that way you don't have to keep your hand up in the air. Thank you all for being so patient with us. Thank you again for coming. Yes.
So, one of the main criticisms for the book, and I don't agree with this, was that it was a fan grab, just because they added so much, so many characters from like Captain Fire, and I don't agree. I don't think that's true because they gave us a lot of lore concerning those characters and how they ended up the way we made them. But what's kind of
I mean, I definitely see what you're saying. I agree. Like, when some of them started showing up, I was like, okay. But I think she gave them some really awesome moments to shine and gave them a full story. I think if Mags and Wyris had just kind of made their appearance early and then we hadn't seen them after the games, I think it would have been that. But I think it really gave it some substance to have something happen to them as a result of how they were helping. And I think that made it important and not the fan grab.
one of the things too, I think about like having those characters. This was pointed out to me on TikTok, and I have not recovered. But Katniss picks the 3 people to ally with in Catching Fire that were Haymitch's mentors and allies in his own games. Yeah, sit with that one for a second. That hurts. So I think it's very much like the one she picked. She was trying to show the parallel. She's trying to put that emphasis.
I think it really does, kind of going back to what she said, it does explain how Katniss had such a strong support system in Catching Fire, because you're taking these characters who've had the experience. Again, Haymitch was trying to fix it on his own. You know, he had these mentors who were trying to help him, or he had these people who were trying to help him, and it didn't work. And you know what they always say, it takes a generation for change to actually be like physically seen. And so seeing that origin story of what these characters went through and why they would be compelled to help again when that momentum was there, it was like right at the right time. She had these people. Why are these people so important? Oh, because over here, 25 years ago, they were kind of the sparks, that kind of grew into all of that. So yeah, I think it was very important.
Well, and also there is always the element of, so when they do Haymitch's reaping and they pull the names out, and then the kid runs and he's shot, and they're like, okay, let's do it again, and they stage it to make it look like that was the first thing that happened, right? Yeah. And so you have to wonder now, knowing that the people who individually tried to resist something the Capitol was doing in the past wound up in the games again in the next quarter. Well, all of them did. They got all of them back in the games. How random was their briefing? Yeah. Or had they selected, they were like, Edie goes back, like Wyrus goes back. Mags less, because she volunteered for Annie, but like, what did Annie do? Right? What did Annie do that they wanted her back? And like, I would be willing to guess that a lot of the people that were put into that 75th Hunger Games were the people the Capitol had particular beef with and wanted to take off the board in a way that would have their own people rooting against them.
Yeah.
And Annie won because there was a flood, right? And that's what they were trying to do in Haymitch's game. So it makes me wonder, like, how many of them?
Yeah, there's some parallels.
Star Trek?
Yes. So one thing that stood out to me was what happened with Luella and how Haymitch staged that, but also how and I don't know if this was intentional, but how they had somebody throw a firecracker in front of the horse and spook it. But in the Katniss's, the horses are very controlled, almost animatronic. And I wondered if that was to prevent something like with what happened, or like what happened with Luella and that part. I don't think her death was intentional. That one, I think they actually learned and they tried to prevent that from happening.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everything that they did, like in between Ballad and Sunrise and Reaping, you can see all of the places where they went, oh, we're on train for that. The cage in the zoo, and what happened with the feeding thank you. Well, forgot English. Getting changed to the gym and all that. The horses. I definitely think that this is supposed to help us understand that this is this horribly intricate, well thought out. Like, this machine has been built in over 75 years of bloodshed.
I will also say, I was not a fan of the casting of Songbirds and Snakes. Yeah, I thought there was absolutely no chemistry between the young man who played Snow and the young woman who played Lucy. So I would say that is actually one of my least favorite movie adaptations.
I have to disagree with that.
Sorry.
And all the TikToks with the loving, everyone's like. In fact, the only problem I had with the casting of Snow is that he's so likable. The actor is so charismatic that like you can't help but fall in love with him, and you really maybe he is a good guy. And if you hadn't read the book,
even more.
I know. And if you hadn't read the book before,
I found the books did a better job of developing his character and made it.
Well, yeah, because you can see his inner
You get to be
thoughts.
inside
That's
his
what I'm.
brain for the whole thing. Of course,
Right.
it's going to develop in there.
No, I did no justice.
Oh, I
Agree to
hard
disagree.
disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
Oh, God.
There was
Yeah.
someone in the back left, who had their hand up. Yes.
You were talking about like the idea that prequel happening as
Mhm.
happening in the
Finish. Yeah, perfect. It all ends there.
We can combine them.
I love
Because the
idea.
only other one that I
Maybe
really
years.
want to see is Joanna, but she's like right before Katniss, so they're not showing us that.
Ooh, and what if that's the last game where Tyrus was a stylist?
Yes.
All
I
three
think
at
so.
once.
I think so.
There was also someone in the back right, who had their hand up earlier. Okay, sunglasses. I see your hand. Ooh, devastating.
I buy it.
I see where you're coming
I see
from,
it.
but I'm gonna have to say I think that is the point of Prim's Reaping is that the odds were in her favor. There was no reason she should have been reaped. She was anyway. I think the point of it is that nobody is safe. Everybody is at risk, and that even if you think you're doing the right thing in the system will still hurt you.
Yeah, the first thing that book does is shatter the illusion of safety.
Yes. Yes.
And saying if you're part of a corrupt, oppressive system, no one is safe.
Okay, I think we have time for like one or two more questions. You had your hand up.
Yeah. What's your favorite theory now that we've read Sunrise about Lucy Gray? Did she live? Did she get away? Is there a body at her grave or not?
I don't think there's
Lucy
body.
Gray.
Yes.
No, Lucy Gray wants the narrative. No, Lucy Gray wants me. I think about this all the time. I think we'll never know, and I think that's the point. I
What's
don't
your
think we can.
favorite theory?
I don't think there's a body. I think she escaped. I think she lived on her own. Maybe she got to 13. I don't know. But
And-
she got away. But there's no body at that gravestone.
Yeah, and I kind of feel I felt differently when I read that. I felt like it was kind of confirmation that Snow had done his job, especially when her uncle is like, "Oh no, not again." I
Yes.
really felt like that confirmed it for me that she was dead and that they found her and buried her. Yeah.
I don't think they ever found a body. I think the one that I like the most is that she got, in her last moments, she was finally free, and then she died in the woods, and that she's gone, but they couldn't take her body, they couldn't take her spirit.
Yeah, I think that with Lucy, it's like she has a tragic ending no matter what, because she was the first person to ever resist the games. And like she was the start of the resistance was Lucy Gray Baird. And she paid for it either with her death or by giving up her life. Because even if she lived, she would have had to live as someone who was not who she was. She could not claim Cubby anymore. And that was her whole identity. So she would have had to go and live a life that was not hers. And so no matter how she ends, she is a tragic character. So I don't know that there's a body in the grave. I think the Capitol absolutely would have told her people she died, whether or not they had a body. But regardless of whether or not she survived the shot, I don't think she lived.
Okay, last question. You've been very patient with me.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just brought up a second ago. People mentioned the flood in the arena during Annie Cresta's games, somewhat mirroring what they were attempting to do with Haymitch's games. I don't think we have any evidence to point to anything specifically in Annie Cresta's games, but I wanted to ask if you think in the 25 years between Haymitch and Katniss, if you think that sort of thing has been attempted again in some capacity,
Absolutely.
and if you think that would be a story worth telling in, say, a future.
With like a Victor we don't know.
Yeah,
That'd be interesting.
I mean,
They don't have to be yeah.
true. Yeah.
They could be from 12 or 11.
Possibly, but my feeling is if that did happen, the Capitol probably did a very good job of covering it up. Nonetheless, if there was an attempt, I think it could be an interesting story to tell.
Well, Joanna Mason tells us that the Capitol already killed everyone she loves.
Right.
So she did something other than win her games
True.
to piss them off. Finnick has been exploited in the Capitol ever since his games. He did something to piss them off. A lot of those victors that wound up in the 75th games did something. So my guess is there has been an inner games resistance going on for a long time that the public does not know about because the Capitol never airs it.
And not just the victors, by the way. What did Thresh do in the arena?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, he was
Right.
in the field, but the recap didn't show it. Katniss never knows. Nobody ever tells her. What if he was trying to stage his own rebellion and that's
We
why
don't
he's
know
not
all their
shown?
mentors.
Well, and also Maisie Donner.
Yeah.
Girl was resisting. She died. She wasn't a victor, but she was resisting. Wyatt was resisting.
Yes.
So many of those tributes were trying to resist. They just didn't survive the arena.
All right, thank you guys so much. Give a hand for our wonderful panelists. Real quick, before I let you all go, just so you know, DragonCon's charity this year is NAMI Georgia, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And our way to raise money is basically we have boxes in the back. You put money in which one you think you would survive. We have the Hunger Games, Third Glass, Fourth Wing, and Emperor of the Ashes, and the fifth option, which is I Died.